Yirmiyahu was a prophet, was a good chaver of mine. Never understood a single word he said, but we helped him to drink his yain. And we always have some mighty fine yain. Singing Simchat Le'olam, Kol HaYiladim now. Simchat to the dogim in the deep blue sea. Simchat to you and me. Yeah.
Welcome to the Haftarah Plethora video podcast, where we might not bring joy to the world, but we do talk about prophets like Jeremiah, and I do mean Jeremiah.
Yeah, in fact, Jeremiah is practically the namesake of this podcast, him and the bullfrog.
Absolutely, Rick. You could even say that we're Jeremiah files. But before we get to Jeremiah, I'm Larry Herman, sipping some very fine wine and talking Haftarah with my very good chaver, Rick Muller, our king of cantillation. How are you doing, Rick?
A little tired today. Haven't been getting too much sleep this week.
Staying up late, huh?
Yeah, a lot of late night news and historical things happening. I'm a historian, you know.
Well, that's a choice that you made. So, Rick, do you like choices?
Where's this going?
Just answer the question. Do you like choices?
Yeah, guess I like choices. I choose my cereal. I choose my clothing. What are you getting at?
All right, not me. I'm not so good with choices. That's why I have the same breakfast every single day. And I pretty much keep my shirts and bow ties in a regular rotation.
Sounds like you might need a little help there.
Perhaps. This week, I went to the eye doctor, to get my eyes checked.
Uh-huh.
You know, when they ask you to compare between the two lenses, and they say, which is better, one or two, A or B, and on and on and on. I hate that. I cannot choose. I can't tell the difference. But there are occasions when I actually like choice.
Yeah, I had that with the hearing test too. I just got to start guessing. I would just guess answers, and they kept going. But so you like it when we have two options to choose from for the Haftarah of the week, or no?
Yeah, Rick, you really know me. That's it. I like it when we can choose the Haftarah, especially when one of the choices is a favorite of mine. In this case, Jeremiah.
And we're actually choosing the alternative that's for Sephardim. Normally, we follow the Ashkenazi tradition and would be reading the selection from Isaiah.
That's absolutely true, Rick. Frankly, I find the connection between the Parsha and the reading from chapter 27 of Isaiah a bit of a stretch. Our viewers can read all about that on page 342 of our Eitz Chaim Chumash. But the reading for Jeremiah makes much more sense to me, which is why we're going to read it. The Parsha introduces us to Moshe and his selection by God as the leader of the people. The Haftarah is from the beginning of the book of Jeremiah and introduces us to Jeremiah and his selection by God as a prophet. Both show the prophet to be reluctant. Both make reference to the power of speech and the prophet's mouth. And both focus on the partnership between God and man. Moses in our Parsha, Jeremiah in our Haftarah. Their power to redeem the people. I like the parallels.
Yeah. And we know that we actually discussed some of this last year. This was the very first Haftarah we did for our first podcast with Pinchas.
That's right. It was because it was after the 17th of Tammuz. But I actually didn't remember that we had done this Haftarah before until we began our preparations, and I thought, geez, this all looks familiar. I think we've done this before. Mm-hmm. It's one of several examples of repeated selections for Haftarot. This is, in fact, the very first Haftarah of admonition. One day we should discuss the issue of how the Haftarot were selected and why there are so many different readings for Ashkenazim and Sephardim.
And some even according to Italian, to Polish, to Portuguese traditions, not to mention Mizrahi and Yemenite.
Yikes. We better get some rabbinic assistance for that one. Anyway, Rick, what do you have for us this week, trope-wise?
Well, actually, I didn't really see any overarching themes. Nothing came out to me except bits and pieces here and there.
Well, so, Rick, I actually noticed something. Maybe you have an idea about that. I noticed that there are a ton of tevirs in this week's Haftarah. I know that Susan Grinnell has asked us to show the trope, which we didn't prepare, but maybe you want to sing a tevir so she knows what it sounds like.
Tevir, it looks like a curve with a dot in it. It looks like a mercha. That's the trouble. It looks like mercha, tipcha, but it's the mercha curve with a dot in it. You got to be able to see the dot.
And usually I don't know how many times, but very often, if not most of the time, it's paired with a dargah before it, right?
Yes, yes.
So I think to me it sounds like someone diving off of a waterfall and landing into a pool. The dargah being the diving down, and then the tevir being the soft landing into the pool. You want to give them a
yes, and tevir is also broken. It's dot 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 dot. It's four separate notes. It comes from that word. So
what do you think they're broken? Why do you think there's so many tevirs in this week's parsha?
I don't know. Aharon ben Asher and his crew, they put the music in, I do believe. And
let me offer a guess then. If you don't have one, here's my guess.
Yes.
Is that Jeremiah is being told is telling the people that they're broken and they potentially might be broken by the invaders from the north. So he's got broken trope or broken words scattered all throughout this Haftarah. What do you think about that idea?
I like that a lot. That works.
Good. Well, on that note, before you have any chance to not like it, let's get right to the chanting. And here's what I suggest for the division this week, that I see the Haftarah being divided in three parts. In verses 1 through 8, we've got the introduction to Jeremiah. There's a very brief bio, who he is, who his father was, what tribe, under what kings he was actually prophesizing. And then we have his very first conversation with God, where God basically says, you're going to be a prophet. Then verses 9 through...
Very calmly and very plain trope, God first talks to Jeremiah.
So it's very, very calm, soothing. Verses 9 to 15, God is showing Jeremiah the prophecy of the impending threat to the kingdom of Judah from the north. That's where he's really telling him what's going to happen and what he's got to tell the people is going to happen. And we'll conclude with verses 16 through 19 of chapter 1 and the first 3 verses of chapter 2, where God is actually giving Jeremiah some hope for salvation, something to tell the people so that they'll be hopeful that things will actually turn out well, even though we know they end up not turning out well, at least not immediately. So how about you say the bracha and then start the chanting.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Divrei Yirmiyahu ben Chilkiyahu min haKohanim asher banatot be'eretz Binyamin asher haya dvar Adonai elav bimei. That's the first tevir, the days, so the broken days of Yoshiyahu ben Amon Melech Yehuda Bishlosh Esrei Shana Lemolcho. Page 348 now. We didn't do the page. Vayhi bimei Yoyakim ben Yoshiyahu Melech Yehuda Atom Ashte Esrei Shana Letzidkiyahu ben Yoshiyahu Melech Yehuda Ad Galut Yerushalayim B'chodesh HaChamishi Vayhi Dvar Adonai Elai Lemor. We'll have the same sentence in chapter 2. Beterem etzorcha v'beten yidaticha uveterem. So there's the second tevir. Teitze merechem hiktashticha Navi lagoyim nitaticha Baomar Ahah Adonai Elohim Hine lo yadati daber, ki na'ar anochi, vayomer Adonai Elai, al tomar na'ar anochi, ki al kol asher eshlachacha telech, ve'et kol asher atzavcha tidaber, al tira mipnehem, ki idcha ani, lehatzilecha neum Adonai.
Very good. You know, Rick, couple things strike me. One is, as you said, it's very calm trope. There's nothing very dramatic. Just a few tevirs and a telisha gedolah there that's a little bit unusual. But I did notice a word that you pronounced in there, which sounded a lot like aha.
Correct. There's a mapik in this is verse 6, the second word. There's a dot in the hey at the end that's called a mapik. It's not like a chet, it's not like a silent hey, it's in between. You breathe, it's aspirated, it's a that's a thing there. And last year I chickened out on telling the joke that I know that has aha as the punchline, so I'd like to do that. Old man Goldberg goes into the restaurant that he's been going to for 30 years, and he orders the soup like he's been ordering for 30 years, and he motions the waiter over, and he says to the waiter, "Try the soup." And the waiter goes, "Mr. Goldberg, it's the same soup you've always ordered. What's wrong with it? Is it too salty? Is it too spicy?" The guy goes, "Try the soup." But he goes, "Mr. Goldberg, tell me what's wrong. Is it too hot? Is it too cold?" And Mr. Goldberg says, "Try the soup." So the waiter goes, "Okay, I'll try the soup. Where's the spoon?" And Goldberg goes, "Aha."
So you think
I love that joke.
You think that's what Yirmiyahu was saying in that verse, Omar, and I said, aha.
No, I don't think so at all. I just like the joke.
I think that's great.
Okay,
I do.
Thank you.
But I also,
yes?
I also like the way in which there's the interplay between Jeremiah and God, where God says, "I fashioned you in the belly I knew you." In other words, he knew Jeremiah even before he was born.
Yes. Yeah, I like the reference to creation. I saw that here, Etzorcha, and then later on you have Reshit in verse 3 towards the end.
Aha.
I always I always like the references to Genesis, but here he says, "I don't know." In verse 6, I don't know how to speak. So he mirrors Moses that way, that Moses said, "How can I go to Pharaoh?" So Jeremiah is saying, "I'm still a boy. I don't know how to do this." And then he gets his confidence over time.
Because God's going to be with him and tell him what to say.
Right.
All right. Well, then in verses 9 through 15, God's going to reach out to him. There's that image of God touching his mouth. And again, I think it's more midrash than it is in the Torah, where we have the story about Moses burning his mouth with the coals because he couldn't speak very, very well.
Yes.
Which is another connection. And he says, "I'm going to put the words in your mouth." And then he gives him the prophecy. And the prophecy seems to be rather pessimistic, and he also tells him the prophecy in metaphors. First is the metaphor of the
plants.
Of the plants, right, and of the almond tree, the shaked.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the steaming pot, we talked about that last year. The north, yes.
Well, it's all pretty horrible stuff, right? I mean, he's telling Jeremiah that he's going to tell the people that you're in for some really bad times.
Yes, and the pause there is the bad people are going to come. Uva'u on verse 15. It's a horrible thing that's coming, but they're going to come and put Jerusalem under siege, as it were.
Right, they're going to come, and then following that pazer on Uvahu in that verse,
Mm-hmm.
You've got that combination of the Talisha Kitana with my favorite, the Karmava Azla. So
Yes.
pretty dramatic.
So each man on his own throne, which is chaos. You can't have everybody having their own little fiefdom there.
I like that reading.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
you can't have an important place and then have people come up and siege it and break windows and stuff like that, you know.
Fantastic. All right. Well,
Ready?
I'm ready for you to recite verses 9 through 15, and we'll pay attention for a few more tevirs, and then in verse 15 the pazer.
Yes. Vayishlach Adonai et yado, vayaga al pi, vayomer Adonai Elai, hine, natati dvarai beficha, re'eh, hivkadticha, it's there, hayom hazeh, al hagoyim, ve'al hamamlachot, lintosh v'lintots ul ha'avid v'laharos livnot v'lintoa vayhi dvar Adonai elai lemor ma'ata roeh Yirmiyahu va'omar makel shaked ani roeh Vayomer Adonai Elai Eitavta lirot Ki shoked ani Al dvari lasoto Vayihi dvar Adonai Elai Sheni lemor Ma'ata roeh Vaomar Sir nafuach ani roeh ufanav mipnei tzafona vayomer Adonai elai mitzafon tipatach hara'ah al kol yoshvei haaretz ki hineni koreh lechol mishpachot Mamlachot Safona Neum Adonai Uva'u V'natnu Ish Kis'o Petach Sharei Yerushalayim Ve'al Kol Chomoteha Saviv Ve'al Kol Arei Yehuda.
You know, Rick, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that joke of yours actually fits in very, very well, because twice God is asking Yirmiyahu, what do you see? It's just like the guy saying, taste the spoon.
Yes.
What's there?
Yeah, what do you see? Where's the spoon? Very good.
So I like that. There's so much there.
Yeah. Okay, so the next section, right?
Next section, starting with verse 16. So we've got 4 verses at the end of chapter 1.
Yeah.
And then another episode, perhaps, at the beginning of chapter 2. But it seems to me that the theme that's uniting it in terms of the content is God is trying to tell Jeremiah that there is some hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there is some hope. And
they'll attack you, but they won't overcome you in verse 19, yeah?
And I guess the question is, in verse 16, where it says, according to the Alter translation, and I will speak out my judgments against them for all their evil, in that they forsook me and burned incense to other gods and bowed down to the work of their hands. There might have been some question about who is the them.
Yes.
Alter, it's clearly the Judeans.
Yeah.
The remnants of Bnei Yisrael. It's not the invaders that he's talking about.
Right. Well, you could expand that and say God doesn't like anybody who just worships to idols and pointless things. So.
All right.
I don't know.
In any case, he does, it seems to me, and I don't see any commentaries that help me to understand why. He offers some false hope, I think, by telling the people, telling Jeremiah, that he's made them a fortress town and an iron pillar and walls of bronze, which would seem to suggest, don't worry, they can't possibly penetrate the walls of your city and invade you. Which we know that
But I don't think those are physical. I think those are metaphorical. I make you, a person can't be a city, a person can't be a pillar, but the attributes of a city, the attributes of a pillar, it's like you'll have inner strength, just like you don't have a nation anymore, but you'll still be a people. And one day maybe you'll come back and make a nation, but you can survive without being a nation, that kind of thing.
All right.
And then chapter 2, I don't want to forget it's more dramatic there. The second pause there, haloch, it's go already, and go speak in the ears of Jerusalem. And then ko, there's a yativ there, which is always a real shock. Amar Adonai. So thus God said, and so Jeremiah, before he didn't have his voice, and now he has a voice to speak more determinedly.
I really like that phrase, Vikarata be'oznei Yerushalayim, to go call out into the ears of Jerusalem.
Yeah, where they live, inside their head. Don't just, speak it from a platform and you don't even know if you're reaching people. You have to reach your audience in their ears.
And then the final tevir in verse 3 is on the word ra'ah.
Yes, bad.
Evil.
Disaster over here, but yes.
Bad or evil.
But you go down and you come back up. You always come back up from bad stuff. You got to keep going. Tevir, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Underneath ra'ah. Again, the curve with the dot in it.
All right. Broken, but not finished.
Yeah. Underwater, but then you come back up, hopefully.
All right, Rick, you want to take us home with verses 16 through 19 and 1 through 3 in chapter 2.
So page 349 now. V'dibarti mishpatai otam al kol ra'atam. There's that evil again. Asher azavuni vayikatru l'Elohim acherim vayishtachavu L'maaseh yedehem, ve'ata tezor motnecha, ve'kamta ve'dibarta alehem et kol asher anochi atzaveka. That's the final kaf, very rare. Al techat mipnehem pen achitcha lifnehem. Vani hine netaticha hayom le'ir mivtzar ulamud barzel ulchomot nechoshet al kol haaretz lemalchei Yehuda lesarecha lechohanecha ulam haaretz. V'nilchamu elecha v'lo yuchlu lach ki idcha ani neum Adonai l'hatzilecha. Vayihi dvar Adonai elai lemor haloch v'karata v'oznei Yerushalayim lemor ko amar Adonai zacharti lach chesed ne'uraich ahavat kilulotayich lechtech acharai bamibar be'eretz lo zerua Kodesh Yisrael Adonai Reshit Tevuato Ko'ochlahav yeshamu ra'ah. Tavo alehem ne'um Adonai.
Fantastic, Rick. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So whether you chant or listen to Jeremiah on Shabbat or Isaiah, we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and may all your choices be good ones.
Yes, stay healthy. Be safe.